How's it going, everyone? Schaefer here, and welcome to my top 10 games of 2024. And now, similar to 2023 top 10 games, there are a couple of rules I would just like to point out before we get started. First of all, this is completely of my own opinion. It's okay if you disagree. It's actually great if you disagree. And it's also great if you agree, so just putting that out there. Second of all, it has to have been a game that released in 2024, brand new game, or if it's a big enough of a, like a remaster. So, for example, Final Fantasy VII, I do consider as a big enough remaster to put it on the list. And I have to have played enough hours, so more than an hour usually, more than a couple hours, preferably a full playthrough, or at least a good enough amount within the game for me to arrive on this list. And so that's the kind of list that we're going to go through. I did play a lot of other games this year that I think were really, really good, but because they weren't released this year, we're not going to put them on the list. Kicking things off at the bottom of the list at number 10 is Star Wars Outlaws. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy about this, and a lot of people didn't like it. Honestly, I did enjoy the main story, and I did enjoy getting through the main story and seeing how it ended and some of the twists and turns that happened. I did enjoy the combat. The stealth thing was a little bit iffy. Well, actually, the stealth was extremely frustrating a lot of the time. But overall, you know, I kind of grew to love the character and the story and the overall feel of it. So, yeah, I mean, it might not be everyone's favorite, but I kind of enjoyed it, and I thought it deserved a spot on my list. Hitting you all with another controversial game of 2024 is Dragon Age: The Veilguard. No, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Dragon Age: The Veilguard. The story, again, I thought was really good. Towards the end of the story, there were some really good story beats and story decisions that I thought were really good. I enjoyed them. I had to actually make the difficult decisions, and honestly, I wish that had been through the entire game. But overall, I enjoyed the combat, the story, and some of the characters, at least, and some of the side quests I thought were really good. But I realize it's not everybody's Dragon Age game. Honestly, it's not my Dragon Age game either, but for an action RPG, it was still a lot of fun. Raiding Tombs at number 8, it's Tomb Raider Remake. Now, I played the original Tomb Raider games, the 1, 2, and 3, the very first ones, and I loved them. They were great, classic, nostalgic games that I can remember from years and years ago. And so, obviously, when they released the remastered, I had to jump in, and I loved it. I had a great time with them. They were visually, they look great. If you haven't played them or looked at them, either go and play them or watch the playthrough I made, because it's vastly different. There's huge differences between the visuals. And I know that some people didn't like the new control system they put into the game, but I quite liked it. I quite enjoyed it, and I actually used it for the majority of the game. There were a couple of moments, though, when I had to change back to the original controllers, or controls in order to do something. But other than that, the new controls I thought were fantastic, and it was still really difficult. It was a really difficult game even for me now. So, but yeah, definitely worth it if you're a Tomb Raider fan. Pick it up. And the new ones are coming out this year, which we're definitely going to jump into at some point soon. So stay tuned. At number 7, we have an action RPG, anime styled, with Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. This is one I took a look at. I love the kind of art style that came with Grand Blue Fantasy. I love the kind of characters that it looked like it had. And so I dived in, and honestly, I had a really good time. It's the kind of game that it's got so much more to offer out after the story. There is so much you can go back and do and complete and unlock. And it just continues for a very, very, very long time. Many, many hours you could sink into this game. But the overall story and the overall design and characters and combat, I had a great time with it. Highly recommend it. It's really interesting that you can kind of unlock new characters and have them as your main. You sort of run around and have them as your driving characters. But yeah, absolutely love it. If you like anime-styled action RPGs, definitely give Grand Blue Fantasy Relink a go. Driving in at number 6 is Pacific Drive. This was a surprise game for me, and it kind of ticked a lot of the boxes. I liked the idea that it was some sort of survival game, and you had to kind of manage your car that you had, but I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And when I dived in, I was surprised. It's like almost got a little bit of roguelike elements. So you kind of jump from point to point along the map, you get into a zone, you gather as many materials as you can, you survive the zone, and then you leave the zone to continue to your next part on the grid up the map, and you make your way up through the map, further and further and further, getting into more dangerous areas and finding more rare materials that you can then bring back to your base and craft with and, you know, build with and expand your repertoire. And I had a great time. I had a great time customizing the car. I had a great time running through the zones. Like, some of the zones were way spookier and gave me the chills, probably a little bit more than they should have. But I had an absolute blast playing it. The story was really interesting. The ending was interesting, and I liked the ending. And I don't want to spoil any of it at all, but if you do like survival games, maybe a little bit of roguelike in there as well, definitely give it a try or watch the playthrough. It's a lot of fun. Breaking us now into the top 5, we start off with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I had mixed feelings about Rebirth. I liked the story, I liked the characters, the zones looked great. The combat was okay. I was hoping for a little bit more development after the first game. And I think my problem was I was hoping for more of the first one. I thought we were going to get more of that game, and we didn't. They tried to make it open world, but they were kind of sectioned off open worlds, and it ended up feeling like we were just trudging through a lot of mud. There was a lot of stuff to get through that just felt unnecessary, and some quests that you spent hours doing, only to have to kind of redo them again. Just a weird mixed feelings for me for Rebirth, but overall I did like the story. It's a Final Fantasy game. I did have a good time with it. I am looking forward to the next installment, the third, I think, and final installment. But yeah, so it ranks 5 on this list for me. Good solid game, great visuals, and I think you'll have a blast with it. There was some really good moments in there. Really good moments. Slashing its way in at number 4 is Rise of the Ronin. This game reminded me of Nioh 2, and the like. Great action RPG. Visuals looked really good. The gameplay was fun. The combat was interesting. There were tons of different styles you could go with. Loads of gear that you could collect. The story was Nioh 2. If you've played those games, it was a story. It existed. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. It was just kind of there to keep you moving forwards. But I enjoyed completing the zones and meeting enemies that turned into friends, and friends turned into enemies, and all that kind of mixed up in it. There was a lot to it, and honestly, if you like Nioh 2 kind of style games, you're going to love this as well. It's got everything in there, perhaps beside the magic part of things, but other than that, a great action RPG that you should definitely check out. Roaring in at number 3 is Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma is a series I got into last year, 2023, 2022. I just sort of pick up Dragon's Dogma, give it a go, and I absolutely loved it, and I couldn't wait for the second one, and honestly, it didn't disappoint for me. Dragon's Dogma 2 did everything that I hoped it would, and more. There were some really interesting classes. I tried to main the Trickster, which at first I thought was really cool, but then kind of grew into being not so cool, but I kind of melded it into my own class towards the end of the game. I can't remember what class I ended up being, but it was one where you can kind of, the Warfarer, Wayfarer, or something like that, and you can kind of mix classes together. And I ended up making a really fun class for myself, and I had a really good time with it. The story was the story, same as the first game. It's about cycles and breaking those cycles, and honestly, I liked it. I had a good time. The visuals were great. Some of the giant boss fights were fun. I just liked going out into the world to fight stuff. I just wanted to go out and do things. I wanted to go out and beat on giant cyclopses. It was just fun, and I had a great time with it. So, highly recommend it. And so if you haven't played the first one, play the first one as well, because that's also a really good game despite its age. At number 2, Unicorn Overlord. Now, this might be a bit of a surprise for some people because it did fly a little bit under the radar, I think. But this has got to be one of the best tactical RPGs I have ever played. And I can't say any more than that. It's such a fantastic game. The combat was fun, the class building, the kind of unit building was great. The tactical sections of it where you had to move your units around maps and win instances was just so engaging, so much fun to do. And the story was interesting, the story was fun, and I wanted to get to the end of it. I was emotionally involved. I just had a great time. If you like tactical RPGs, definitely take a look at picking it up, and don't let the visuals put you off. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like sometimes the 2D styled graphics, but I think it looks fantastic and it plays really, really well. And now, before we get started with number 1, we are going to talk about a couple of honourable mentions. Honourable mentions might be games that I played that released, or games that got updated that I maybe not finished, or maybe partially finished, or didn't put enough hours into. And I would just like to mention them because they didn't make it on my top 10, but ultimately I think they are really good to talk about. The first one is Palworld. That probably comes as no surprise to anybody. I think it was a huge success on release and still gets a fair few players even today. It's great. If you like creature games and creature capture games, this is absolutely for you. Visually, it looks great. The game played really well. It had a bunch of survival mechanics in there. Great overall game. Highly recommend if you like these kind of games. The second game I wish to talk about is Until Dawn. Never played Until Dawn ever, and then it came out on PC this year, I believe. But it wasn't a remake. Sorry, it was a remastered. And so it just visually had some upgrades, and I thought, for Nopetober, I would jump on and have a go. I loved it. I had a great time with it. Chilling, nerve-wracking. There were a lot of jump scares for me. I was all over the place, so you can tune in to watch that if that's your thing, to listen to me get scared every 5 minutes. There were some areas I was just so anxious to move into. I just wanted to delay moving into those areas, but overall I had a really good time with it. On the back of that, and number 3 honourable mention would actually be slicing its way in with style at number 1 is Stellar Blade. I mean, it had to be, for me. It just absolutely had to be. Stellar Blade was everything that I wanted in a game. It's got great action, great combat, great visuals, rewards galore. I could go anywhere on the map and find a little treasure, even if it was just a new costume to wear. I didn't care, because it was just great to finally go into a game where I can go wherever I want, root into all the corners and find some nice loot. It had a good story, it had interesting characters. I just loved it. Stellar Blade was a great game for me. And honestly, I was so sad that it was over. And I was tempted to just rerun the game back, just play it in a harder difficulty and do it again. But then they released the skins for 2B, and I was like, well, I've definitely got to do it now. I haven't. I've resisted the urge to go back. But honestly, the more I talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I do want to go play Stellar Blade again. Highly recommend it if you like action RPGs. It's got great challenge, great visuals, great combat. And if you're really good at it, you're really good at it. And you know what I mean if you've played it. But yeah, for me, Game of the Year, Stellar Blade, hands down, without even having to think about it. When I made this list, it went straight to number 1 without a problem. And so there you have it. That is my top 10 games of 2024. What were your top 10 games of 2024? Let me know. I'll be glad to hear them. There are plenty of games I didn't get to play this year. Stalker 2, for example, that I would have loved to have jumped into, but I'm just going through so many of the games, I just don't have the time. Like, I'm going through a massive Assassin's Creed franchise run, trying to get ready for Shadows, although we're not going to, but we're doing our best. And those are some of the games that I think that I would have liked to have jumped into and played properly, but just didn't get the chance to do this, so unfortunately. But maybe this year if we get time, we can pick them up. But there are some great games coming out in February, so stay tuned for those. And that's it. That's all I have to say for this one. So thank you very much for watching. Appreciate all of the support. Like the video if you did. Subscribe if you want to get some more of this amazing footage, amazing gameplay. And I'll thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.